It is the 4th, my friends, and you know what that means. No, not Independence Day. Though I hope everyone watching this video from the States, like me, has a great one. But today is the anniversary of a far more worldly and historical event, the fateful Battle of Hattin, where Saladin of the Muslim forces fought and defeated the Crusader army under King Guy, and the Kingdom of Jerusalem collapsed afterwards within a matter of months. There's a vast backstory to this tale, and perhaps one day I will get into it, but for now you'll get a bare overview of the backstory. And to clarify, in this, the year of our Lord 2019, it is the 823rd anniversary of the Battle of Hattin. Now, I'm going to call it that even though many people call it Hattin, just letting you know that that's just something to take note of. Anyway, let me give some backstory before we delve into the account of William of Tyre. King Baldwin IV, also known as the Leper King of Jerusalem, was dying from his leprosy. He knew his days were numbered, but despite his curse of a disease, he was a very cunning and formidable king, and made it so that his successor would be his nephew, born of his sister. And if his nephew were to perish before coming of age, then there was a commission for the King of England, the King of France, the Holy Roman Emperor, and the Pope himself would come together and decide who the next King of Jerusalem would be. Unfortunately, when he passed, his nephew passed shortly after of leprosy as well. It apparently ran in the family. And the commission was never set out because the following events were set in motion. His mother, Agnes, had a lover of the Lusignan family. When the king died, and Agnes had lost a son and a grandchild, the lover, Amalric, offered his brother, Guy of Lusignan, or Guy de Lusignan, to marry her daughter being Sibylla, who was the sister of King Baldwin. Guy, a cutthroat adventurer and part-time raider and outlaw, came to the Holy Land and married Sibylla, effectively becoming king in Jerusalem. Now, Agnes, Sibylla, and Guy were very unsavory people, unlike Baldwin. Not only that, but more unsavory people flocked to them. The holy patriarch of the city was notably corrupt. Humphrey of Turon, one of the possible candidates for the throne, was so weak-willed that he immediately rode to Jerusalem to pay homage to King Guy. And perhaps worst of all, Reynald de Chatillon, or Reynald of Chatillon, who was perhaps an even more cutthroat raider than Guy, joined them. His crimes were so terrible that his very presence gave Saladin legitimacy in finding the court of Jerusalem reprehensible, and giving him reason for war. The older lords of the land could not oppose them, unfortunately. Raymond III of Tripoli was the only man who could claim any right to the throne other than the weak-willed Humphrey, but Guy now had too many supporters within the city of Jerusalem, and Raymond could merely sit back and watch as he and the other lords, such as the Ibelin family, witnessed the beginning of the end. Now I will read William of Tyre's account of the battle. William of Tyre is one of the most prominent, unbiased, and secular chroniclers of the time, though it is to note that William did truly dislike Guy's wife and mother, so this could perhaps be one of the few times in his writing where you might believe he tried to bathe Guy and the Crusaders in a bad light, but modern historians believe him trustworthy enough to still not alter details, and 3 other accounts of the battle are very, very similar to his, so I will now read the account. Now, I shall tell you about King Guy and his host. They left the springs of Saphiria to go to the relief of Tiberias. As soon as they had left the water behind, Saladin came before them and ordered his skirmishers to harass them from morning to midday. The heat was so great that they could not go on as to reach the water. The king and all of his men were too spread out and did not know what to do. They could not turn back, for the losses would have been too great. He sent to the Count of Tripoli, who led the vanguard, to ask his advice. The message came back that he should pitch his tent and make camp. The king gladly accepted this bad advice, though when he gave him good advice he would never take it. Some people in the host said that if the Christians had pressed on to meet the Saracens, Saladin would have been defeated. As soon as they had made camp, Saladin ordered his men to collect brushwood, dry grass, stubble, and anything else that could be used to light fires, and to make palisades all around the Christian host. This command was carried out in full. Early the next morning he ordered the fires to be lit. This was quickly done. The fires burned vigorously and made an enormous amount of smoke, and this, in addition to the heat of the sun, caused the Christians considerable discomfort and harm. Saladin had commanded caravans of camels loaded with water from the Sea of Tiberias to be brought up and had the water jars positioned near the camp. They were then emptied in the sight of the Christians, with the result that they and their horses suffered even greater anguish through the thirst. A strange thing had happened in the Christian host that day. when they had been encamped at the springs of Sephiria, for the horses refused to drink the water either at night or in the morning, and because of their thirst they were to fail their masters when they were most needed. Then a knight named Geoffrey of Francleux went to the king and said, "Sire, now is the time for you to make the Polions with their beards dear to the men of your country." One of the causes of the hatred between King Guy and his Poitevins and the people of this land was that when he became king, the Poitevins sang a song in Jerusalem which greatly incensed the men of the kingdom. The song went, "Malgré les Polions, avrons nous roi Poitevin." This hatred and scorn gave rise to the loss of the kingdom of Jerusalem. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I am reading the account. When the fires were lit and the smoke was great, the Saracens surrounded the host and shot their darts through the smoke, thus wounding and killing men and horses. When the king saw the torments that were afflicting his army, he called the masters of the temple and the Prince Reynald, who asked their advice. They counseled him to join battle with the Saracens. He ordered his brother Amory, who was the constable, to organize the divisions. That's another word for Amalric, who was Agnes's lover. He did as best he could. The Count of Tripoli, who had led the vanguard at their arrival, led the first division and was out in front. In his division he had Raymond, the son of the Prince of Antioch, with all of his company and the 4 sons of the Lady of Tiberias, Hugh, William, Rolf, and Oste. Balian of Ebelin and Count Jocelyn made up the rear guard. Just as the divisions were being drawn up and the battle lines were ready, 5 knights from the Count of Tripoli's division deserted and went to Saladin and said, "Sir, what are you waiting for? Go and take the Christians, for they are all defeated." When he heard these words, he ordered his men to advance, and they started off and drew near to the Christians. When the king saw that Saladin was coming against him, he ordered the Count of Tripoli to charge. It is a right belonging to the barons of the kingdom that, when the whole army is in their lordship, the baron on whose land the battle is to take place leads the first division and is out in front. On entering his land, he leads the vanguard, and on leaving, he leads the rear guard. Accordingly, since Tiberias was his, the Count of Tripoli took the forward position. The Count and his division charged at a large squadron of Saracens. The Saracens parted and opened a way through and let them pass. Then, when they were in their midst, they closed in on them. Only 10 or 12 knights from the Count's division escaped. Among them were the Count of Tripoli himself and Raymond, the son of the Prince of Antioch, and the 4 sons of the Lady of Tiberias. When the Count saw that they were defeated, he did not dare go to Tiberias, which was only 2 miles away, for he feared that if he shut himself up in there and Saladin found out, he would come and take him. He went off with such company as he had and came to the city of Tyre. After the division had been defeated, the anger of God was so great against the Christians' host because of their sins that Saladin vanquished them quickly. Between the hours of Terce and Nones, which is 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., he won the entire field. He captured the king, the master of the temple, Prince Reynald, the Marquis William, Amalric, the constable, Humphrey of Turan, Hugh of Jubail, Plivian, lord of Botron, and so many other barons and knights that it would take too long to give the names of all of them. The Holy Cross was also lost. Later, in the time of Count Henry of Champagne, who ruled the remaining portion of the kingdom of Jerusalem, a brother of the temple, which is a Templar, came to him and said that he had been at the great defeat and had buried the Holy Cross and knew where it was. If he could have an escort, he would go and look for it. Count Henry gave him an escort and his permission to go. They went secretly and dug for 3 nights, but could not find anything. Then he went back to the city of Acre. This disaster befell Christendom at a place called the Horns of Hattin, or Hattin, 4 miles from Tiberias, on Saturday, July 4th, 1187, the feast of the Saint Martin Calidas. Pope Urban III was the pope in Rome. Frederick was emperor in Germany. Philip the son of Louis was king in France. Henry was king of England, and Isaac was emperor in Constantinople. The news of it struck the hearts of those faithful to Jesus Christ. Pope Urban, who was at Ferrara, died of grief when he heard the news. After him was Gregory VIII, a man of saintly life, who held the papal see for 2 months before he too died and went to God. After Gregory came Clement III, to whom Archbishop Josias of Tyre brought a truthful account of the news, as you will find written below. After the battle, Saladin had left the field rejoicing at his great victory, and was in his camp. There he ordered all the Christian prisoners who had been taken that day to be brought before him. First they brought the king, the master of the temple, Prince Reynald, William the Marquis, Humphrey of Turan, Amalric, Hugh of Jabal, and several other knights. When he saw them all lined up in front of him, he told the king that he would have great satisfaction and would be held in great honor, now that he had in his power prisoners as valuable as the king of Jerusalem, the master of the temple, and the other barons. Then he ordered that syrup diluted with water be brought in a gold cup. He tasted it and gave it to the king to drink and said, "Drink deeply." The king, who was extremely thirsty, drank and handed the cup to Prince Reynald. Prince Reynald would not drink. When Saladin saw that he had handed the cup to Prince Reynald, he was angered and said to him, "Drink, for you will never drink again." The prince answered that if it pleased God, he would never drink or eat anything of his. Saladin asked, "Prince Reynald, by your law, if you held me in your prison as I now hold you in mine, what would you do to me?" He replied, "So help me God, I would cut off your head." Saladin was greatly enraged at this most insolent reply and said, "Pig, you are my prisoner, and yet you answer me so arrogantly." He took a sword in his hand and thrust it right through his body. The Mamluks who were standing nearby rushed at him and cut off his head. Saladin took some of his blood and sprinkled it on his own head in recognition that he had taken vengeance. Then he ordered that Reynald's head be brought to Damascus, and there it was dragged along the ground to show the Saracens whom the prince had wronged that vengeance had been executed. Now, just to reiterate, William of Tyre, his account does not show the exact nuances of everything that's going on, and we can garner a few things. One, King Guy and his host, which was most of the kingdom of Jerusalem, left water behind and went towards Tiberias to relieve the castle of Tiberias from Saladin. Saladin wisely held the water at Tiberias, and King Guy and his host were without water, and he was told to stay at Hattin, right by Tiberias, and camp that night. And that only led to them being thirstier for going another day without water. And then the morning on July 4th, they fought. And Saladin essentially mocked him and kept up his forces in the defensive and harassed them until the Crusaders pretty much died of exhaustion and thirst. The woes of the Crusaders. Some say the ghosts can still be heard of them just screaming for water and air. And, well, happy July 4th, everybody. But legitimately, it's cool. It's really cool that this also happened on July 4th. And so whenever it's July 4th, I always think, yeah, Independence Day, but at the same time, the Battle of Hattin, the decisive battle that led to the Third Crusade. Alright guys, have a great one.